Hello everyone, bringing you the Mannequin of the Month for May 2021 today. And as is usual, the topic for this month has been picked via a poll over on Patreon, where the corporal tier have the opportunity to vote each month on what's going to be covered in Mannequin of the Month. And what we're looking at this month is an anti-aircraft gunner of the Royal Marines, more generally a Marine qualified as a quarters rating second class, which we'll get to in a minute as we talk about the uniform on the mannequin here. This isn't all we're going to look at. The reason I have the uniform and so forth set up here without any of the items you'd normally see worn in action is to show the badges and so forth on the cuff, which would otherwise be obscured, and just to talk a little bit more generally about the uniform. So the first thing to consider is Royal Marines serving as gunners. At least as early as 1890, at the time, of course, the Royal Marines had several branches. You have men of the Royal Marine Artillery and the Royal Marine Light Infantry qualifying in naval gunnery. So this is the Royal Marine Artillery, obviously, are qualified as gunners on shore to serve as artillerymen in a sort of very similar role to the Army, the Royal Artillery. But they could also train as naval gunners aboard ship in naval gunnery, which does differ somewhat. And similarly, Royal Marine Light Infantry were also able to qualify, and they wore corresponding badges of naval pattern to show their gunnery qualifications, which we'll see on the cuff in just a minute. So the uniform we have here, however, is basically standard Royal Marine uniform of the time in terms of sort of their blue service dress uniform, blue jacket, navy blue, in wool serge, obviously very similar to that which is worn as a dress uniform today. But at this time period, it's actually still a working uniform. It's made in the same rough serge material as battle dress, the same weave as the drab serge used to make battle dress, but in navy blue. And the Royal Marines would introduce a navy blue version of battle dress as well as the war progressed. But what we have here is still obviously the service dress uniform. An anachronism to mention here, of course, we're looking at circa 1942. The medal ribbons are an anachronism to this, of course, so please ignore those, but they are originals for the jacket, so obviously I don't want to remove them for the purpose of this video, but ignore those. We have the blue top cap at the top, of course. The Royal Marines at this time period still had a white and a blue top cap. See, that was somewhat dispensed with during the war, although white top caps were still worn in hotter climates in a similar manner to the RN. But in home waters, the blue cap became standard. Originally, of course, this had been blue in the winter, white in the summer, the same as it was at the time for Royal Navy ratings. So that was something that would disappear post-war, and of course now the caps are white top only, the same as Royal Navy ratings. So you have the collar badges here, you have Royal Marine buttons down the front on the pockets and so forth, and RN brass shoulder titles. So it's quite a nice uniform from that point of view, very smart, but as I say, it is worn as a working uniform at this time. Obviously 1937 pattern web belt here just to show it off, set it off a bit. We'll turn this a quarter turn to the left so that you can see the cuff and the badges on the cuff, which we'll talk about now. Looking at the badges on the cuff here, we can see, first of all, two good conduct badges, two good conduct stripes really for Royal Marines. These have been brought in line with Royal Navy ratings good conduct badges in 1919 in terms of the years of service for which they were awarded, the years of good conduct for which they were awarded, and badge pay. So in Royal Navy ratings receive only 3 good conduct badges at maximum, and you get an increase in pay for each of these. The same is true for Royal Marines, but you could receive more than 3. You just didn't get any more pay once you've got your pay for your third. So by 1942, or at the time period we're looking at, you have 3 years good conduct and then 8 years good conduct, and the third would be 12, and then subsequent on from that. But you'd only, as I say, you'd only get the good conduct pay for the first 3. Above this, we have a naval gunnery qualification worn where trade badges or other qualifications, marksmanship qualification badges would also be worn on the cuff here. Obviously that's more akin to army practice as opposed to the Royal Navy, where they're worn up on the arm opposite the substantive rate. You wear your non-substantive rate, which is your trade badge or your qualification badge in your specific branch. What we have here is the badge for a quarters rating second class. Now for a Royal Marine, that shows that this man has passed for corporal. That is to say, he's passed the qualification examination to be promoted to corporal, but he hasn't been promoted yet. So he's passed the examination but not been promoted, and that means he can qualify as a quarters rating second class. That's obviously represented here by a star, which shows the high proficiency over crossed guns, and the Q below showing quarters ratings. Now, I've said this is specifically an anti-aircraft gunner. That's not entirely true from just what we can see here. It's just that this is based on photographs of Royal Marines serving on anti-aircraft mounts. There were different classes of anti-aircraft armament on board ship. You had obviously heavy guns or dual purpose guns, which could do both jobs. You could fire at surface targets or at aircraft. And then there were lighter, close-in anti-aircraft weapons, such as the Oerlikon 20mm, the Bofors gun, and then you had the quad pom-poms and things like this, the various smaller, not necessarily machine guns, but smaller cannon armament for anti-aircraft purposes. They were served by specific anti-aircraft gunners. Now, it wasn't until 1943 that Royal Marines began to qualify as specific anti-aircraft gunners on these smaller pieces. So this is a quarters rating serving any of the myriad larger guns, but the photographs I've based this on show Royal Marines serving these larger anti-aircraft guns. As I say, those don't fall into the specific anti-aircraft qualification. So we have the standard, the quarters rating. And quarters ratings were, the qualification here, obviously the qualification within the Navy is quarters rating second class. That essentially is, the role is essentially serving the guns, serving the mounts, operating the equipment within turrets and within mounts. And quarters rating second class would quite commonly be found as the captain of a gun, where you have two guns in a mounting. You might have a first class rating commanding that mounting, or where there are multiple guns mounted in single mountings, you'd have a first class rating in charge of those multiple guns, those multiple mountings. So that's the badges. What we'll do now is we'll look at this with the anti-flash gear and so forth and the helmet added to show you sort of more what this would look like in action in 1942. So here we have the uniform with the various additional items worn in action, which, starting at the top here, we have the steel helmet, as you can see here, the Mark II steel helmet, which is obviously standard by this time period. And then we have the anti-flash gear, which consists of gloves and the anti-flash hood. You'll note in the photograph used for the thumbnail of this video, the men aren't wearing anti-flash gear, and that's due to it being a training scenario. But in action, anti-flash gear will be worn. Obviously, this is to protect you against flash. It's fire protection essentially, and is obviously still worn today. Though, as we'll see in a moment, this is a slightly different design. So I'll just remove the helmet and we'll have a look at the anti-flash hood. With the helmet removed, you can see the anti-flash hood here. It just has an opening. And these were issued with separate gauze guard for the mouth and nose. Obviously now, and certainly later in the Second World War, these were manufactured and issued with an integral gauze section which covers the nose and mouth. And that's essentially the design that's still used today. There is a stamp on the anti-flash hood here, which we'll just get a close-up of now, which shows the manufacturer. And this is something Morley Limited. I can't quite make out, KR Morley Limited, possibly, 1942, and you can see proofed underneath that. The respirator is carried. As you can see, we've got the strap for the haversack crossing the chest here. We'll just turn this round now and have a look at the respirator haversack. Looking at the left-hand side here, you can see the respirator haversack down below, and you can see also up on the shoulder here the Royal Marine shoulder title there. We'll just take a closer look at the anti-flash gloves. You can see these elasticated up here at the elbow and at the wrist as well. There's elastication there as well, as you can see, and these are made of proofed cotton to give fire protection. And then we have the Mark 6A respirator haversack. You can see this has a waist belt attached to it so that it can be worn and carried at the hip, and the waist belt can be used to secure this at the hip so that it doesn't flop around. So it's the Mark 6 design, which has the main compartment on this side against the body for the respirator with a long hose respirator inside it, so it can be carried here. The hose can loop round and the respirator can be worn with the hose reaching right down to the bag. And then we have the two compartments on the front, one for eye shields and one for the anti-gas ointment carried there in the front of the haversack there. We'll just move this around now so we can have a look at the back of the uniform. Looking at the back of the mannequin here, we can see some of the uniform details. There are no vents in the tails of the jacket here at all. The seam running down the centre there, and there are seams coming down underneath the arms here. You can see here as well we do have a belt hook, and there's a corresponding example on this side, obviously to help support the belt. And then we have a slightly better view of the Mark 6A respirator haversack there. There isn't really anything else to see on the right hand side, so that's it for looking at the mannequin here. So there we are. I do hope you found that interesting. If you have and you'd like to read more about Royal Marines serving in a gunnery role aboard ship, I can recommend an article from RM Historical, which I'll put in a pinned comment down below. I'll put a link to that down there. It's worth a read. It details the badges worn, the role of specific branches of the gunnery branch, so quarters ratings, gun layers and so forth, how the badges evolved, how the roles evolved, It's well worth a read, and I'll put a link to that down below should you like to have a read of that. If you found this interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, little notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal I'll link down below. And a huge thank you as ever to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below, and there will of course be photographs of this posted up over there as well. If you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is an email address down there as well. But that's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.